Welcome to the first episode of Clones and Ripoffs. Now, it's not the first video I've done on this subject. I've actually done quite a few that are just in my list videos, but I figured it should have its own series by now, so it just made sense to kind of spin it off at this particular point. And we're kicking off this series with Evil Dead Clones and Ripoffs. Yes, there's quite a few, and I've actually done a previous list of Evil Dead ripoffs in my list playlist, so go check that one out first to see the ones that I did previously, and let's check out 7 more, or we'll be dead by the morning. Number 7. This first one here is from back in 1988, and it's from Italy, and it's called Evil Clutch. And keep in mind that this is post-ED2 and pre-Army of Darkness. It starts with a bunch of Polaroid pictures and a couple talking about being on vacation together and a man being drawn back to a woman who says he's under her power. Her hand turns into a claw and she castrates him and then turns into this demon-looking thing. Then there's that couple from the beginning and oh, what's this? Well, doesn't this look familiar? It's that demon woman and the couple help her out and they also encounter this man. He's wearing a white lab coat, aviator goggles, a suit, and talks to them through a voice box. He tells them that there's some horrible force nearby that possesses people and compels them to commit evil acts, and we flash back to see a man kill his girlfriend, but she comes back as some sort of creature to get revenge, showing up as this deadite-looking thing. He freaks them out and keeps following them around, and every time that they want the evil to be approaching them, they do the Samocam. Of course, they eventually find their way to an old house out in the woods and strange stuff starts to happen, including a zombie-like fellow attacking them, and then some tentacle stuff. And, okay, so this one was written and directed by Andrea Marfori, and this was his feature debut. And he would only go on to direct 5 more movies, and took a gap between '93 all the way to 2016. Much like The Evil Dead, this one began life as a short film that was then redone and expanded upon in the bigger release. It was done on a budget of 100 million lira, which looks to be somewhere around the $50,000 range. The title in Italian is Il Bosco 1, which is basically the Woods 1, and they put the 1 on there as sort of a commentary about the fact that so many other horror films at the time were sequels. It looks like it had a bit of a hard time finding distribution, but eventually ended up getting released by Troma over here. And I should point out, by the ending of this film, the demons are possessing people and coming after our heroine. And it got to the point where basically every review was pegging this as an Evil Dead clone. Like, the ending of this one is basically a carbon copy of the ending of the first film with meltdowns and all. And the final shot, if not exact, is almost a direct rip. And it's not great. It has a handful of amusing things going for it, but it's too convoluted and random to be anything but a collection of stolen moments. Number 6. This next one is from 1995, and it's on here mainly for the title, although there'll be some filmmaking similarities as we'll see, and it's Evil Ed. Here there's a film editor, and he's gone nuts and blows up his own head with a grenade. They need to hire a replacement and bring on Ed, a meek and timid guy, and he's horrified that the film he's brought on to work on is really gory and over the top. They give Ed a little country cottage to have some privacy to do the work, and there's even a big nod of awareness in that there's an Evil Dead 2 poster up on this door. Soon, the film and reality are starting to blend, and Nick delivers him the new reels, and shortly after, he sees this doctor telling him that he needs to correct the world. It gets weirder when there's a gremlin thing in his fridge, and then there's this shot. But then, it's also got this cool little demon creature guy, and when Ed accidentally murders his boss, he goes a little over the edge. And yeah, there's not much similarity with the plot overall, but there's just so many stylistic bits that are cribbed from Evil Dead. Like, for instance,
groovy.
And the fact that there's a character named Sam Campbell. But eventually, it's a full-on slaughterhouse as Ed starts taking out anyone that comes up to the cabin, seemingly either insane or possibly just possessed. But Evil Dead isn't the only film getting shoutouts here.
I'm coming to get you, Barbara.
And this one is from Sweden and was directed and co-written by Anders Jacobsson, and this was also his first feature film. After this, though, he focused more on cinematography for TV and didn't make another film for 15 years until 2010 with Insane, and then took another 11-year break, not making anything else until 2021's The Killer. Just like Evil Clutch and also like Evil Dead, this started as a short film concept but then bloomed into something longer. It was made over 3 years and was originally titled The Censor and was meant to just be the stuff at the cottage. After filming, they put together a rough cut and decided to add more sequences to make it feature length, adding the beginning sequence and the entire final act in the hospital. One of the characters who was meant to have been killed had his death scene chopped out, as he's revealed to be alive in order to become the main character in this finale. Somewhere along the way, they changed the title to Long in Brainland, but when released, it was called Evil Ed, a clear tribute to the films that inspired it. Number 5. Here's one that's more recent since it's from 2014, and it's Demon Legacy. This one has a girl named Michelle who has just broken up with her boyfriend, but she's also haunted by these crazy dreams in which her friends are all dead. She rents this isolated cabin out in the woods, of course, and invites her sorority sisters up there. So yeah, 5 college students in an old abandoned cabin in the woods, so we're already most of the way there. One of the girls is actually Kate Siegel, and I want to say that this is early in her career, but she was fairly established by this point, and it's like post-Oculus. When it's mentioned that they expected a more run-down cabin, they flat out say that they were expecting Evil Dead, and it seems like the place has a spiritual reputation. They start arguing for basically no reason and party down. As you'd expect though, there's something in the cellar that gets woken up, and quickly after, they see something outside, and someone goes into the basement. Yup. There's not a book though, and there's a Ouija board, and yup. They immediately play it, and they all think that they're talking to Michelle's grandmother, but stuff starts going wonky. Before you know it, yup, they're being possessed, sporting fairly familiar looks and antagonizing each other, as opposed to just killing them and playing tricks by making them think that they're normal again. You know, the Evil Dead stuff. And this is by a guy named Rand Vossler, and for the 3rd time in a row, it's his directorial debut. Although he's worked for quite a while in the industry in the art department, going as far back as 1988, where he worked on Critters 2. This would end up being his only film though, and his only other directing is shorts and TV episodes. This came out a year after the 2013 Evil Dead remake, or whatever we're calling it by this point, and it's pretty clear that it was made to cash in on that and follows the formula to a T. It looks like it wasn't smooth sailing though, since it seems that it started filming back in 2008, but then had to stop due to a massive snowstorm, and didn't recommence until a year later, but then got delayed again by a forest fire and had to pause again. However, in that time, some actors were no longer available, so they had to do a big rewrite of the film's finale, which is probably why John Savage just appears out of nowhere to help fight the creatures in the last 20 minutes or so. And it's fine. It's pretty run-of-the-mill stuff, but it's amusing enough, so it's not hard to watch, but it's also not got much going for it that you haven't seen. Number 4. We're headed back into the past now to 1989, and I guess you could say we're headed into the Black Past, since that's the name of this movie. It starts a little stream of consciousness as this man thinks about a young girl feeding a dog, and then getting an axe to the head. We then meet young Tommy here, and he's having trouble with his family and with the kids at school. One day he's asked to go up into the attic and comes across an old trunk that's all locked up. He doesn't take that as a sign to just leave it alone and breaks it open, and inside, go figure, there's an old dusty book. There's also an old mirror there, and he goes and reads the pages of the book out loud because he's a moron, while his friend looks on. Reading the book doesn't do anything here though, and it's just said that the mirror is ancient and cursed, so Tommy does the logical thing and hangs it up on the wall. Before you can say Dead by Dawn, it's possessing his girlfriend, and it's actually pretty damn creepy. and she walks herself in front of a car. While trying to deal with it, he starts to have some visions, including a crazy baby doll that catches fire, but then his girl is back to life and coming after him, laughing the whole time, in a scene that's insanely familiar. It's just a dream, though, and he's tormented by the visions while we're tormented by this one guitar riff over and over again that sounds like a Dave Matthews song. And is it just me, or is Tommy's mullet getting more and more out of control as this movie goes on? And this is yet another first film, since it seems like a bunch of horror directors got their start doing Evil Dead ripoffs. And this is by Olaf Ittenbach. And this is from Germany and shot on Glorious Video. It looks like the budget was only around 10,000 Deutschmark, which currently translates to about $5,000 or so. Not only does Ittenbach direct, but he also wrote the film and did all the special effects, but he also plays Tommy and his mullet, both at the same time. With how cheap it was, it has a surprising amount of practical effects and clever filmmaking tricks to create some fun moments, and this is another one that has the same ending of the first Evil Dead, with Deadite-like villains melting down. Number 3. This next one goes back to 2002, and now let's look at Matthew Blackheart, Monster Smasher, which opens up with an armed man entering a public space, which I guess hit differently in 2002, and he walks up to little baby Jay Baruchel. And look at how young he looked back then, and it still looks now. We get the backstory of Matthew Blackheart that says he was created 50 years ago by a man named Dr. Franken to destroy monsters. And this is the way he talks.
Smoking is bad for you, Matthew. So's a bullet through my brain pan.
So it's very clear that this was definitely patterned after an Ash-like character. Franken is Wyndham Earl, and Blackheart refers to monsters who pose as humans as bogies, and they send him to Patagonia to fight a bunch of them.
Here's one for Mother!
He's captured by the evil Dr. Mortis, though,
I'm gonna drop you like a bad habit!
and essentially delivers silly one-liners after everything that he does. He gets put into some sort of cryogenic chamber for over 50 years, waking up in the present, and he goes back on the hunt. He ends up at this club, and there's a woman performing, and I swear this is straight out of a stand-up routine where someone is like, what if Bjork sang children's songs?
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
And like everything about this guy screams that he's doing a Bruce Campbell thing.
So what kind of action are we looking for tonight?
Who wants to know?
And if you think that I'm off the mark and that it's not intentional,
Me too! $10 an S-Mark!
and Blackheart then has to uncover the big undercover operation by the bogies as well as adjust to the modern world. And this one was directed by Eric Canuel, and this was not his directorial debut, but it was his first American feature film, as his only previous movie was in Canada. It seems like this was a Sci-Fi Channel thing, and it's possible that it was done with the intentions of acting as a TV show pilot, but clearly nothing ever came out of that. Based on the man out of time thing it's got going on and all the American soldier adjusting to modern life after being active in World War II, it's clear that there's a bit of Captain America going on here too, but the wisecracking, square-jawed, kinda sexist goofball up against monsters is all Ash. Keep in mind, this is the post-Army of Darkness era, but pre-Ash vs. Evil Dead. And this was when Bruce's whole persona was still popular and had been co-opted by Duke Nukem and tossed in a dash of Buffy to boot. But it's also very Army of Darkness, up to and including the fact that the whole movie is just a story being told, with the ending going back to the real world to have our hero be a bit of a jerk before then having to face off against a new menace. Number 2. We're going back and forth through time here because now we're going back to 1987 for a movie that's widely referred to as the biggest Evil Dead rip around, and it's Forever Evil. We're in Texas and we have a group of people meeting up at their friend's cabin. Seems like they haven't used it for years and are looking to sell it off, and it's revealed that one of their girlfriends is unexpectedly pregnant. Then That night, as they're all partying, she takes a shower, and they find her body dead with the fetus removed. Then everyone tries to figure out what to do, but there's something else there with them, killing them off one by one, revealed to be some sort of creature with glowing red eyes. Since it's an Evil Dead rip, a woman is attached by tree branches, but there's also a zombie man. Eventually, only Mark is left alive and he ends up in a hospital, and the police begin to investigate, including Officer Leo and a reporter who previously survived a similar slaughter. But then this weird hooded figure appears before a psychic named Brother Magus and gives him a shock, and our trio heads to that psychic's house. And here's where we get a bit more Evil Dead-ish, but also not, because they find a bunch of old books, and one of them is the Necronomicon. And then several others are all about Yog Kothog, an H.P. Lovecraft old one. And the Necronomicon was also part of his works. Inside the book, the artwork looks pretty familiar, and it swings further into Evil Dead territory a little later when Mark encounters a demonic version of his dead girlfriend. But you'll notice that what I'm talking about doesn't sound overwhelmingly like anything from the Evil Dead series. Like, there's some similarities at times, and there is a Necronomicon, but there's far more references to Lovecraft than Raimi. And the truth is that I don't really think this one is that much of a ripoff. That's why I didn't put it in my first roster of these, but a couple of people mentioned it in the comments. And if you go on Letterboxd or IMDb, you'll see that almost every single review calls it a low-rent Evil Dead. But I think it's enough of its own thing that I normally wouldn't put it on here, but maybe there's something that I'm not seeing that others do. But anyway, it was directed by Roger Evans, and the only other thing he directed was a silly sci-fi comedy called The Jet Benny Show that I haven't seen for ages, but I'm probably due for a rewatch. And I dig this. It's not great, and it's way too long, and the whole middle portion drags, but it's got some nice character stuff, some fun gore, and I like it, even if I don't think it belongs here. Number 1. Okay, it's about to get crazy because now we're headed all the way over to India for 2007's Bhayam. Now, the last time I did a bunch of Evil Dead ripoffs, we did one that was a near exact remake of the first film from India, so let's see what this one is like. This one will be tricky because I couldn't find a version with subtitles, so we're just going by visuals and not dialogue. We meet our group of students, and I've definitely noticed a pretty huge propensity for the leads of these Bollywood clone flicks to have characters with mustaches and just mustaches. There's a lot of campus shenanigans with some wacky hijinks, but then it happens. Our group loads up in a car and heads up into the woods, and they actually incorporate footage from the first Evil Dead movie straight into it. But then they try to reproduce it, but they don't use the Samo cam. Instead, it's just a handheld camera, which is less impressive. But it duplicates the whole car out of control moment, only with a tiny car going about 5 miles an hour, which is less intense. They make it to their cabin, which looks far less remote, considering you can see a bunch of houses all around it, and it's less intimidating since it's painted like a Minecraft house, but it does have that iconic swinging porch swing. They just start hanging out and stuff just starts happening for really no reason at all, including more footage from Evil Dead 2. And yep, this is another direct remake, considering that they do the drawing of the clock bit, the basement, the tape recorder. Like, it's all pretty exact. They also redo the pretending to be asleep thing, but like, barely try. But the disappointing part is that we're 42 minutes in and there hasn't been a single song. Also, for comparison's sake, this is 42 minutes. And we're seeing a moment that we got at the 20-minute point in the original film. In case you were wondering, yes, they do include the branch attack, but stop short of doing what the OG did. And also oddly cut in clips from it. The possession stuff finally starts to happen, done way less impactfully, and for some reason they keep cutting in this generic sound effect of a woman screaming. It's by a guy named D. Ranga Rao and was the second of 4 films that he did altogether. And yes, it's just a Bollywood remake of Evil Dead, but lacks that crucial element that would have pushed this into the land of greatness: musical numbers. Instead, it's a silly, over-the-top, but less over-the-top than the original film, and without all of the inventive camera stuff and special effects. But it also does something that no Evil Dead ripoff has ever dared to do. Probably the unthinkable. Yes, they gave it a happy ending. So there you have it, 7 ripoffs of the Evil Dead series. Yeah, some pretty fun ones in here and a couple of clunkers, but for the most part, a pretty good watch. Most Evil Dead ripoffs are still pretty entertaining. Let me know which of these you've seen down below. Let me know some other Evil Dead ripoffs that you'd like me to see cover in the future. Let me know other movies that you want me to try to find ripoff ofs. Tell me that down below in the comments. Also, if you just like this video, let me know that. Also, if you do like it, click on that like button. And if you like the channel, hit subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when new videos are posted. And check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support this channel to keep it going. And yeah, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. And we'll see you very shortly for another one of these great videos. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.